Hey everyone, my name is Janet. Now let's dim the lights.
Oh, the horror!
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things spooky, uninviting, and downright horrific. And just as my usual disclaimer, I don't take myself seriously. I really hope that you don't either. I'm just here to provide lighthearted, digestible reviews. So if you are looking for something a little bit more in depth and critical, there are YouTube channels that do that. I'm just not one of them. Today I'm bringing you a list of 10 movies that either take place on Halloween or around Halloween or are related somehow enough to get you in the mood for the holiday. I know it's pretty early in the month, but I wanted to send this out to you guys well enough in advance so that you are able to go out and actually watch some of these movies. I tried to avoid the super obvious choices here, such as Halloween or Sleepy Hollow or Ghostbusters, because as usual, I really hope that I can show you at least one or two films that maybe you might not have seen. But that being said, I did include one very obvious choice, but I just couldn't leave it out, and there is a new sequel that just came out for it, so I felt like it was an appropriate time. Let's get started. This list is in no particular order, and honestly, I could have thrown so many more movies on here. It was really hard to narrow down what I wanted to talk about today, but I do probably need to save some content for next year and the year after and the year after.
And the year after, and the year after.
First, we have Terrifier, which is a 2016 slasher horror film co-produced and directed by Damien Leone. Even if you haven't seen the film, you may be familiar with its antagonist, Art the Clown, because he's truly one of the most convincing and horrific movie villains of all time. See what I'm saying? Terrifier takes place on Halloween night as we center around two young women, Tara and Dawn, heading home from a costume party. They come across a petrifying character, Art the Clown, who they write off as a deranged vagabond dressed for the occasion. However, as they hear on the radio of a murderous lunatic on the loose who matches his description, it's too late and they've already become the victims of his terrifying game. I've recently showed this movie to friends, and by showed, I mean I made the executive decision that we were going to watch it, and they could not stop ragging on it the entire time. They absolutely hated it. And I understand, Terrifier is not for everyone. It's very much a low-budget, grindhouse horror film, but it has one of the most memorable, gory moments of all time. If you're a fan of these kinds of movies, I highly recommend that you give it a try. As I mentioned earlier, the villain is so well acted, and honestly, the film has a really interesting, unique identity to it. I give it a 6 out of 10, and if you can get past the bad acting on the part of all the other actors and past the weird coloring of the film, it's a great watch. I also want to mention that Terrifier 2, the sequel, just came out this past weekend in theaters, and I believe that it will be released on VOD November 2nd. I have not had a chance to watch it yet. I honestly might be doing a little review on it later this month, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, you can catch 2016's Terrifier free on certain platforms like Vudu and Tubi, and you can also rent it on any VOD platforms. Next up, we have Trick or Treat, which is by far my favorite Halloween movie, but beyond that, it's one of my favorite movies to put on in the fall in general. It's a 2007 horror anthology written and directed by Michael Dougherty, who, as of last week during a Q&A at a screening for this film, has finally confirmed that he's in active development on the sequel, which is incredible. It's only been, 15 years? Trick or Treat tells a series of tales that all take place in one town on the same Halloween night. The stories are all laced together by one common thread, or should I say, threat. That is the somewhat adorable pumpkin-headed villain Sam, who makes his presence known in each gruesome tale. This is one of the most nostalgic and definitively Halloween movies of all time. It's one that I really struggle to wait until closer to Halloween to watch, because as soon as Trader Joe's puts out their pumpkins in September, I'm ready to watch Trick or Treat. You have no idea how excited I am now that I know the sequel is coming out. I give Trick or Treat a 10 out of 10. It's full of urban legends and inventive deaths and candy. What more could you ask for? It's currently available to rent on VOD, but I believe it's also playing later this month in AMC movie theaters, and if you have not seen it, I highly recommend you go out to the theater and watch it. Switching gears here, because as a child of the 90s, I couldn't not put this movie on this list. It is Hocus Pocus. It was directed in 1993 by Kenny Ortega and stars some majors such as Bette Midler, SJP, and little baby Thora Birch. Even though I know the film isn't really spooky by adult standards, I cannot be the only child who was terrified of the spell book made out of human skin with one singular moving eye. Come on. Hocus Pocus centers around a coven of sister witches. Together they are all on the eternal hunt for children whose youth and souls they will steal after being fed a magic potion. After a successful witch hunt puts them in their graves for 3 centuries, teenager Max unknowingly undoes their curse and sets them free to wreak havoc on Earth. As they're determined to suck the soul out of his little sister Danny, it's Max's job to send the witches back where they belong. I'm sure we all heard about the sequel that came out a couple weeks ago. I personally haven't had the chance to watch it yet because I had to go back and show P the first one, which I cannot believe he hadn't seen it. He has absolutely no excuse. We are the same age and we grew up in the same era of movies, and that was just a classic in my household growing up. It was so terrifying at the time, but I haven't heard the greatest things about the sequel. But honestly, I wasn't really expecting a whole lot to begin with. I feel like we're all kind of in it for nostalgia's sake at this point. And for them to reprise their roles 30 years later, I'm sure that some of the magic, pun intended, is gone. Hocus Pocus, the original, gets an 8 out of 10 for me. I mean, that's my childhood right there. But P hadn't seen it until now, and he still thoroughly enjoyed it. So if you missed the boat, or you're just not as old as I am, it's still a really fun one to watch. Hocus Pocus is now available to stream on Disney+. Moving on to the first of several very similar movies on this list is House LLC. It's a 2015 mockumentary found footage film that is written and directed by Steve Cognetti and has since been bolstered by not 1, but 2 sequels, which the first one is a decent watch. The second one I have not even seen because I heard that it was pure trash. Hell House opens with a documentary crew investigating the mysterious death of 15 people at the opening night of a haunted house attraction in a small town. They interview the sole survivor of the incident, Sarah, who then provides a personal account along with footage of what really happened that fateful night. We witness a group of friends in the various stages of creating a haunted house and the buildup of terrifying and unexplainable occurrences that led to that night. I love this one. It's on my Halloween rotation every single year. I just feel like you can't not love a haunted house movie around Halloween time, which is pretty evident based off this list of mine. But pair that with found footage, you just can't go wrong. Well, I guess if you try to stretch out the concept into a trilogy, you could, but the first Hell House is an absolute gem. The scares in this film are just perfect. I remember some of them really did haunt me for a while after I watched it for the first time, but this movie is just so great to put on with a group of friends to get you in the mood for Halloween. I give it an 8 out of 10, and it is now streaming free on so many platforms, including Amazon Prime, I believe, so go out and watch it. And while you're at it, if you liked it, watch the sequel, because the sequel, I think it's called Abaddon House, that's a great one as well. Up next, we have another one that's on the yearly rotation, and that is 2019's Haunt. Co-written and directed by Scott Beck and Beck Woods, it's another haunted house horror thriller, which is shaped in the form of that cliche teen ensemble horror movie, but however low-hanging the fruit, this one is so well done and so much fun. Haunt takes place on Halloween night when a group of friends decide to ditch a party and stumble upon an obscure extreme haunted house attraction. Forced to sign a waiver and relinquish their phones at entry, the group quickly realizes that they've signed up for a treacherous game of cat and mouse, and they must find a way to escape the maze. I'd say that this film is like a PG-13 version of Saw, unless Saw is PG-13 itself. But regardless, it's an adrenaline rush of Halloween-themed horror, and it is so much fun. I would give this a 6 out of 10, and I know that it is streaming on Amazon Prime with an AMC subscription, otherwise you can rent it on VOD. Let's keep this haunted house theme afloat and move on to yet another haunted attraction movie, which, spoiler alert, will not be the last. But this one is a little bit different. I think it might actually be the first documentary I've ever recommended to you guys, and that is Haunters, Art of the Scare, John Schnitzel's 2017 documentary. Haunters is a documentary for all horror lovers out there. It chronicles the process of setting up some of the most famous haunted attractions across America, as well as their history and inception. In particular, the film provides a closer than comfortable look inside the tactics employed in the most extreme haunted house of our era, McCamey Manor. I don't know about you, but I equate fall with haunted houses. Back when I lived in the Midwest, there were some insane attractions once you drive out to the boonies, and I'm talking hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of production value and hour-plus long haunts. There is nothing worse when you get all amped up for a haunted house and you drive super far and you're only in there for like 15, 20 minutes. Last year was the first time that I went to Hollywood Horror Nights, and it was a disaster. We were there, I think we waited 2 hours for each haunted house, and we were there for a total of 4 hours, and we tallied up how much time we actually spent in the haunts: 4 minutes and 58 seconds. Under 5 minutes, and we were there for 4 hours. Ridiculous. But I digress. Haunters is such an intriguing documentary, and I feel like I learned so much about something that I love to do. The segment on McCamey Manor was absolutely bonkers. I know that I personally will probably never get a chance to look that closely at it because I am never ever in my life going to do it. If you have not heard of McCamey Manor, it's one of the few haunted attractions that has kind of an everything goes policy where you have to sign this like 60-page waiver and you have to have like a clean bill of health. It's that intense, and they can literally do anything they want to you. I've seen videos, well, I don't want to ruin it, but if you are interested in knowing a little bit more about what they do, watch the documentary. It's probably the only way you'll ever find out. I give this doc a 9 out of 10. It's not only informative, but it is very interactive. It was pretty scary to see some of the things that they're capable of doing in these places. If you want to watch the documentary, it is available to stream for free on many platforms, including Amazon Prime. Last but not least on this haunted house train is Bobby Rowe's The Houses October Built, which is another haunted attraction mockumentary / found footage film. It's undeniable that there are similarities between this and Hell House, but I would say that it's more of an amalgamation between Hell House and Haunters. 2014's The Houses October Built follows a group of thrill seekers who are looking for the most extreme haunted house they can find. As they tour the country, going from haunt to haunt in search of it, they soon realize they're being followed by the same two actors the whole way. When they hear buzz of a truly terrifying experience called the Blue Skeleton, they follow that lead without realizing that they're already participating in the world's scariest haunt. If I had to choose between this and Hell House, I would probably still pick Hell House, but The Houses October Built does a really great job with the jump scares. I'll admit that the acting isn't great, but if you are planning to go to some haunted houses this fall, maybe put this on before you go and it'll really amp up that suspense. It also has a sequel that I wouldn't really recommend watching, but I would give this one a 6 out of 10, and it's available to stream on a lot of platforms for free, but you can also rent it on VOD. Moving away completely from anything found footage or haunt related, we are taking it back a few decades to the good old days of classic horror films. I'm talking about 1981's Hell Night, which is directed by Tom DeSimone and stars the exorcist Linda Blair. Hell Night takes place on Halloween during an annual college party, where 4 pledges are forced to spend a night in the infamous Garth Mansion, which is supposedly haunted by the victims of a familicide 12 years prior. At first, it's all fun and games until innocent fraternity pranks give way to violent acts of vengeance by the scorned lone survivor of the massacre. If you can look past the overt misogyny in this film and chalk it up as being a sign of the times, which admittedly is kind of hard to do in this case, it really is such a quintessential Halloween horror watch. This was a new one for me. I can't believe I actually hadn't watched it until this year, but it gave me an instant sense of nostalgia as soon as I put it on. If you can appreciate the campiness of classic 80s horror like Sleepaway Camp and Fright Night, I would say you're probably going to love Hell Night. I give it a 7 out of 10 despite the notoriously horrible acting, which I personally find just adds to the charm of it. Hell Night is available to stream on platforms such as Amazon Prime and Tubi. Next up, we have another anthology film that was deemed by Fangoria to be the best horror anthology since Trick or Treat. It is Tales of Halloween. Released in 2015, it is more anthological in the sense that each story is presented by a different director. Tales of Halloween weaves together 10 separate stories that share one thing in common. They all take place on Halloween night. The film covers urban legends about every kind of monster, from ghosts and ghouls to axe murderers and aliens, and even the devil himself makes an appearance. While I do need to warn you that it doesn't do nearly as solid of a job as Trick or Treat, and the acting is quite subpar, Tales of Halloween does still embody that good old spirit of Halloween, and it deserves some recognition. I would give it a 5 out of 10, and it's streaming for free on pretty much every single platform you could think of. I have to put a disclaimer on this last one because it's definitely the least Halloween-y of all the films that I'm talking about today, but still I feel like it does incorporate a lot of the things that I attribute to Halloween as, which is sitting around the fire or a Ouija board, whatever it may be, and telling spooky stories. I'm talking about 1998's Urban Legend, which is directed by Jamie Blanks. It is the first of a trio of movies that all revolve around urban legends. I am such a sucker for this kind of thing, and even though it doesn't exactly revolve around Halloween, the movie very much takes place in the fall and feels really autumnal, and there is a Halloween party in it, although that's not really part of the plotline at all. Urban Legend is an ensemble slasher film featuring a group of college kids who are all enrolled in a folklore class at their New England university. They learn of their school's own urban legend just as students around the school start dropping like flies at the hands of an unknown serial killer whose MO incorporates an urban legend into each kill. Natalie, played by Alicia Witt, finds herself somehow connected to each murder and soon realizes she might be at the top of the killer's list. If you're a fan of 90s whodunit teen horror films featuring an ensemble of really hot actors and actresses such as young Jared Leto, I think you're going to have a really fun time watching this one. I actually showed it to my friends last night who hadn't seen it, and they all loved it. I give Urban Legend an 8 out of 10. It is so iconic and never takes itself too seriously. It truly is the perfect movie to get you in the mood for fall. The movie is streaming for free on Pluto TV, or you can rent it on VOD. Light that pumpkin spice candle, get ready to carve that jack-o'-lantern, pop one of these movies on, and just be your best basic autumnal self. There is no shame in that at all. It's truly the most wonderful time of the year. If you've stuck around this long, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked it and you want to subscribe to it, and we'll see you next week.